So this presentation is about problem-based learning. And to start by defining this concept, Barrell says that it's essentially an inquiry process that resolves questions, curiosities, doubts, and uncertainties about complex phenomena in life. And I think that there are a couple of important components in that definition. So the role of questioning, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but that students ask questions to answer questions, and that there is this revolving process which allows for continuous learning and reflection. That these are about complex phenomena, meaning that there are not really simple answers or solutions, that it takes a lot of critical thinking to find steps towards a solution, and that these phenomena truly exist in life. So there's the role of authenticity, and that authenticity creates a more meaningful learning environment for students. Essentially, this includes 7 different pieces. So beginning with a problem statement that will be the motivation or inspiration for a particular unit. There are various student roles that usually are disseminated amongst like a smaller team, so groups of students within classes that are working towards this. It would be kind of difficult for, I have a class, my class size is 38. So if I were to have all 38 working as one group on the same issue, I think there could be room for some students to conveniently find ways to remain uninvolved. So smaller groups would be more ideal, even if they're working on the same products. Because of their own lines of inquiry, they might end up getting towards different solutions, different lines of thinking. So smaller groups where every student is able to have a role. They're then able to kind of analyze the current situation, maybe historical backgrounds of something. What are the facts? And research should facilitate this. And then they can investigate. Students can investigate answers to questions that you pose or questions that they pose themselves. And they do this again through the process of research. And then they need to analyze their new findings. So here's what I used to know. Here's what I now know. And how can this take me farther in my journey? The presentation of findings can be done in a variety of different ways with assessments that would be appropriate for the given unit. I have some suggestions in my own opportunities for implementation later, which I'll share. And so the presentation of findings and the variety of assessments, to me, they really speak to each other. So how are students going to share what they know? And in sharing what they know, a teacher should be able to assess not only the product that they created, but the learning that was part of that product. Ascenda and Whiteleaf also discuss certain habits of mind that exist within PBL. So we're having our students work through these active verbs of problem finding. So what is a problem to begin with? I think at the younger grades is probably more helpful to provide students with those problems. But as they get older, it would seem appropriate that students could find the problems themselves to begin that problem statement. They go through processes like visualizing what the current situations are, improving those situations, considering solutions to problems that are creative, that don't yet exist, that allow them to really just take on and embrace challenges and allow their own creative energies to kind of flow in. And then adapting. Adapting is a great habit of mine that I really like that they include, because as they learn of solutions or barriers to their solutions, they'll need to figure out what changes do I need to make, what might be appropriate or inappropriate. Another thing that I appreciate in PBL is that students take ownership of their learning, and they do that because of there is so much choice for them. So really they're much more learning what they want to learn versus what we want them to learn. The self-directed inquiry and research gets them there, and the idea that they're solving an authentic problem creates certainly more buy-in. In the Barrell book, there's a quote by Tyler that says, "It's what the students do that counts towards learning, not what the teacher does." And I think that that's a really good reminder, since this is more of a student-centered model. Much of PBL relies on the role of inquiry, asking questions, and that can exist in a number of ways. So throughout the research process, any research that you're doing is seeking to find answers to questions, but also the the confidence and ability to ask questions, to generate them, to think of them, to share them with others. So that happens through high quality listening skills, which, in English, listening is part of our standards. And so having to listen to the views of others, to the thoughts of others, to the questions of others, and allow that to inform your own thinking, to create your own questions, is actually really sophisticated. There can also be questioning by building off of others' ideas that are shared, and then the use of reflective journals to think about, what did I know? What did I learn? What do I still wonder about? That sort of active reflection could be very powerful, and it could allow students to go from point A to point B as they go through this PBL journey. There's also the notion of the different levels of questions. So I think of Costa's levels in the Barrel book. They have the graphic of the 3-story intellect that's like a 3-story house. So the level 1 questions are kind of the superficial. They could be yes or no. The answer could be found in a book. It's a fact. It's a pretty black and white scenario. Level 2 is a bit more complex, where you're having to understand and interpret more. And then level 3 would be your highest level of thinking. And that's more into the application and inference and allowing your thoughts to go a bit farther. One thing that I found kind of helpful also in the Barrel book, they talked about that the traditional classroom setting, sometimes the role of inquiry looks a lot more like a quiz show. So the teacher is asking questions and you're hoping that the students have memorized the correct answer, and that when they share that, they would be awarded points. And those points would come in the form of probably points on a test. And what we're really trying to get away from is that rote memorization, or the idea that there's one single answer and that's all we care about and that's what we're getting to. Instead, we want questioning that takes us to new places. So for myself, opportunities for implementation of PBL, I teach 2 different subjects. I teach AVID and I teach English. So to start with AVID, which is a college and career readiness program, essentially, honestly, I feel like the opportunities in AVID are endless. So we are somewhat guided by standards and strategies that are Wicker based. So that stands for writing, inquiry, collaboration, organization, and reading. And as we've worked through this PBL stuff, AVID is just at the front of my mind, because 2 out of our 5 standards in that Wicker are inquiry and collaboration, and that's supported by reading and writing, 2 more of the 5. So AVID is a setting where essentially anything goes, and we're really just trying to create more dedicated learners. And I think that we could come up with some really meaningful projects and have the time and the flexibility to implement them. In a more structured class like English, I do feel like there is a greater challenge, but I also think that we have a lot of opportunities as well. So I thought of a couple. For instance, after we read a particular article, a book, go through any kind of literary fiction or nonfiction unit, that we could use the themes of that for inspiration of issues to problem solve. So I included the example of, we study To Kill a Mockingbird, and we work through the concept of empathy, and we do a lot of thematic work about empathy. Where could we then take that concept of empathy and consider social justice related issues where we could seek to understand others and perhaps solve some problems that the students could think of. Additionally, a little less specific, but equally important, we have a major responsibility in English to teach and review regularly research skills with our students. And it doesn't really matter what they are researching or even what they are producing at the end of their research, so long as we are facilitating high quality research and learning during that time. Things like the utilization of strong databases, understanding credibility of sources, citations, but any of that could fit into whatever problem students could be seeking to learn. So as long as we are properly scaffolding and teaching those research skills, they could be applied to a great deal. And then I also think that it's important, and this is kind of, in my opinion, where traditional structures struggle, that we need a variety of products. So the essay at the end of every 6-week grading period model, I think it's time for that to go. Essays are important. Essays are just one example of a way to put your ideas down on paper, but they're not the only way. And so if we as English teachers could be more supported and comfortable with creating a variety of products to show learning. So for instance, creating a PSA, writing an editorial, sure, writing an argument essay, maybe creating infographics. These are all really sophisticated ways to show critical thinking and learning, but they might just be a little non-traditional, and I think maybe it's time we consider that. And that is the end of our problem-based learning Module 4 assignment.